Which teams are on the nice list? Which teams are on the naughty list? We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, December 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at MondoMan12. Follow show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers and on Blue Sky at LOFLA Panthers. No underscore there. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back here on the show as we are getting close to the Christmas break. Right now, we have a roster freeze in the NHL that's going to go on until next week. So this is a great time because the fact that these teams are not allowed to make any moves from now until next week, to maybe play a little bit of a game of naughty or nice when discussing the whole NHL landscape. And because we are so Florida Panthers centric, this gives us an opportunity to talk more about the league at large. But here joining me to discuss more about the naughty and nice lists here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast on this Friday edition. It is a Fairbanks Friday edition. Nich Fairbanks, he is back here on the show. So Nich, welcome back, my friend.
Thanks for having me back. And man, it feels like it's been a long time since Florida's played in Florida. But you know what? We have the holidays coming up, so let's put some cheer on this thing.
Yeah. 13 days since the last time the Florida Panthers played a home game in Sunrise. So great to see that they're back there, and especially after the way they finished their road trip. So let's go right into it of the nice list and we'll start with the Eastern Conference. I'll name 4 teams that I have put on my nice list, and then I'll hand it to you, and then we'll have a discussion about it. So my nice list for 4 teams in the Eastern Conference, I'm going to put the Florida Panthers, Washington Capitals, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Ottawa Senators. And before I hand it off to you, my criteria is not necessarily based on record, but even if a team is struggling, I put some teams in my list based on if I see a sense of direction in their build. So that's why I have them some in my nice list and some of them in my naughty list. So your nice list for the Eastern Conference teams, your 4.
So you got to put the Florida Panthers on there just because of what they've had to kind of go through this season with their defense and some of the goaltending issues. The Toronto Maple Leafs are definitely there. They're playing a different style, and they're definitely on top of the Atlantic right now. I am going to go with the Washington Capitals as well because of the hot start, and especially with Alexander Ovechkin with his blistering start before getting hurt. And then my 4th nice team, as much as I hate to say this, is going to be the Pittsburgh Penguins, just because their trajectory lately, they've been winning a lot of games, and Sidney Crosby looks like Sidney Crosby of the late 2000s, early 2010s.
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head with the Pittsburgh Penguins, even though I didn't have them on my nice list, but they are. You saw Brian Rust get a game winner last night against the Nashville Predators for them, and even before last night, they were doing this without Crosby scoring. So all they needed was the media to ask him, hey, what is it with you not scoring? And then, hey, look what happens. He gets on the scoreboard last night with, like you mentioned, with the Washington Capitals, not reliant on Ovechkin, and also having a true tandem in goal with Charlie Lindgren and Logan Thompson, which there was a little bit of a discussion with if Logan Thompson was going to make it onto Team Canada, and guys like Connor McMichael, Dylan Strome, Alexei Protas. On the blue line, Jacob Chikrin with some tough vets that will suffocate you along that blue line with John Carlson, who's healthy now. And Tom Wilson took a puck to the face against Montreal and scored 2 goals after that. So other guys stepping up. And the Leafs, Low event hockey. They right now have a line of Marner, Matthews, and Nylander together to try to help them generate a little bit of offense. Still have some questions right now in goal with Anthony Stolarz out 4 to 6 weeks with the pebble in his knee. That's what happens with bigger goaltenders. Their injury risk are a little higher, but it's just, man, there was a lot of criticism going to the way of Craig Berube for how he handled the goaltending situation instead of going back and forth, where after he had a great start against the New Jersey Devils, where he was basically the sole reason why they won after New Jersey just dominated the game offensively, and they only won that by a score of 2-1. And also the Devils lost last night as well against the Blue Jackets after getting 40 plus shots on goal. But still, they wanted to see him face against Anaheim as well, and also face in his home state of Jersey. But that maybe have resulted in the injury there for them. So let's go to Western Conference teams on the nice list for us. I'm going to put the LA Kings, Calgary Flames, Minnesota Wild, and the San Jose Sharks on my nice list. How about your nice list for the Western Conference?
You got to go with the Winnipeg Jets and their really ridiculous NHL record-setting start. I am going to go with the Minnesota Wild as well. Very solid team, back and forth with Florida between their two matches this season. I am going to go with the LA Kings. I feel like that they're just on the cusp of becoming a great team again. And then my fourth nice is I'm going to go with the Utah Hockey Club. Mm-hmm. One of the teams I did predict to make the playoffs this year. However, they have 3 games in hand on Colorado, and they're only 3 points out right now.
Yeah, and think about for the Utah Hockey Club, Sergachev maybe struggled a little bit into getting to showing his worth as a second pair D-man, and then you provide him in a new situation. Now he's a big part of that Utah Hockey Club there for them. LA, man, if there is anything that we are seeing in the game of Anze Kopitar at age 38, and looking at Alexander Barkov at age 28, we're seeing Kopitar age like fine wine over there out west. And this gives me confidence that even when Alexander Barkov's contract does come to an end, there will be a small extension after that for Barkov, and that his game can translate even after that even if he's not in his offensive prime, that it'll continue to carry over. And the fact that the LA Kings are doing it with Quinton Byfield not getting going just yet for them. So that's another thing that is making this start for LA so great for them. And I hope that they don't draw Edmonton again in the first round, please. I want to see them against a different opponent, and because those series have just ended earlier every single year. But still questions in net if Darcy Kemper is a number one. I know he's won a Stanley Cup with the Colorado Avalanche, so that's a little bit of a question. Calgary, the reason why I have them is just they're not bottoming out. We didn't expect them to, but we're seeing a regression, like for Jonathan Huberdeau, for him getting back a little bit of his game, a little bit of his confidence. Mackenzie Weegar is a number one D. Dustin Wolf, undersized goaltender. We recently saw him shut out the Florida Panthers there. And also for the San Jose Sharks, Macklin Celebrini. He is a tank at 18 years old, winning a whole bunch of board battles against grown men. And I can't even imagine when he gets to age 25 of when his body does truly mature, how he's going to be looked at in the eyes of NHL fans, of maybe possibly a Selke Trophy winner in his future.
I can't argue with Celebrini. He looks as advertised, if not better. There's people already talking that he may be better than Connor Bedard. Yeah. I'd argue that Celebrini has a little bit better of a supporting cast, and also he's got a bigger frame, so his body's able to take more of a beating or withstand more of the NHL game. And then, as you said, with Calgary, I think they started off really well, and now that they're coming back down, I think what you're going to say, I don't know if you're trying to say regression back to the mean, but I think that they're back to where they actually should be, like in the middle of the pack, and maybe they can squeak in there, but that means that Huberdeau, Kadri, and then their goaltending needs to stand up for the rest of the season. So it'll be interesting to see. But don't sleep on some of these teams out west. I mean, some of the teams that you expect to be in the basement may not be in the basement for too much longer, because they are making moves and they are improving. It seems like month over month.
No doubt, and it's it's definitely going to be interesting to see where, like you said, the Utah Hockey Club, what they're going to do with their 3 games in hand, with being 3 points back of the Avalanche and everything there, and the Pacific. There's a few points separating, and of course, in my opinion, the strongest division maybe in the entire NHL, the Central Division. If we mentioned Winnipeg, we mentioned Minnesota. There's so much emphasis to win that division because we saw what happened in the 2-3 matchup just last year. So that's a division I'm for sure keeping my eyes on. But we're going to transition to segment number 2, where we are going to discuss our naughty lists across the NHL. Who is on our list? We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. And if you love sports, you're going to love PrizePicks, the best place to turn your sports knowledge into real money. Whether it's hockey, football, or any of your favorite sports, PrizePicks makes it easy to get in on the action. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30 million in rewards during Picksmas and offering you 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. So download the app, use code LOCKEDONNHL, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly, and you could do that all on PrizePicks. Run your game. And welcome back to this Friday, December 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Now we are going to discuss our naughty list here across the Eastern Conference and West. So my 4 teams for the naughty list, I'm going to go with Buffalo, the New York Rangers, the Detroit Red Wings, and the New York Islanders are my 4 Eastern Conference teams on the naughty list. How about your naughty list? I'm sure we have a few that are similar.
Well, how can you not go with the 2 teams from New York? You know, you have the Rangers, who every other day it seems like there's another problem coming out about the organization or something that's going on in the locker room. I am going to go with the Detroit Red Wings just because I actually watched one of their games the other night. They ended up winning, but you can just see that there's just so much inconsistency, and the team is just not gelling the way that I think Stevie Yzerman wants them to. I am going to go with the New York Rangers. Well, I already said the New York Rangers. Buffalo, for sure. Apparently, they don't have any palm trees up there, so they can't attract any free agents.
They have taxes too.
Hey, everybody's got taxes. That's my argument. And then, you know what? I know that they've played a lot better since the change in coaching, but I'm still going to put the Boston Bruins. Mm-hmm. I have yet to see them actually play an Eastern Conference team when it matters. Like, they actually play a good hockey game. Like, they're out west right now, and they beat Vancouver. Brad Marchand put his hand up to his ear after scoring, after they booed him whenever he touched the puck. But right now, I think Boston is just on a little high with the change, and they're going to come back down to earth again when they start playing people within their own division.
Yeah, they still hate him over there with that 2011 Stanley Cup final there for them. But, I mean, let's go back to the comment that I rephrased earlier. No palm trees, they have taxes. And just how much of a disaster that's been over the last few weeks in Buffalo, of Kevin Adams talking to the media, and then Terry Bagula traveling up to Montreal to talk to the team and give them a vote of confidence on everything. But there's also a little bit of the paralysis of the analysis going on in Buffalo because of what's happened in their past of trading away guys like Ryan O'Reilly, Brandon Montour, Sam Reinhart, Jack Eichel. But that's their own doing with Jack Eichel, specifically with the surgery that they did not allow him to get. And then they burned that bridge themselves, stripping him of the captaincy there. And it doesn't make it an attractive destination for them. You have to give Jason Zucker more money in order to sign there for him. So you gotta generate more things from within. And also the rush and development of guys. They almost rushed Devin Levi over to Buffalo. They rushed Jack Quinn when he wasn't waivers exempt, and now he's a healthy scratch when he's not waivers exempt. So it's like, what are we doing here? When you're looking at everything with the Buffalo Sabres, and now the trade rumors are possibly of what could happen if they traded Dylan Cousins. Will he be the next person to win a cup if he's traded out of there? So it's just a whole mess over there. And then New York, Barclay Goodrow, they didn't in the offseason. He didn't want to be traded somewhere, and then they said, okay, we're going to put you on waivers, and San Jose claimed him. He was basically the only person who could generate offense in the entirety of the playoffs. And then the whole Jacob Trouba situation of threatening with waivers there. Capo Caco, I don't think the breaking point was necessarily when he spoke to the media about his scratching lately. I think that was a breakup that was inevitable for them. It was just a lot earlier than I expected. But I mean, the fact that they didn't get a big return for Caco, man,
and they could have.
They could have. I think he's going to thrive in the next place that he goes to. But it's also about rushing him right as soon as he was drafted number 2 overall. And then there's so much regression from the guys like Ryan Lindgren, who's holding Adam Fox back. Mika Zibanejad, if he's not scoring, that he's getting scored against a lot. And then the Yzerplan, it's just head scratching. And Patrick Waugh in New York calling out the GM in the media, and then and also the play around his goaltender, even with wins, for them. So but that's not Patrick Waugh's fault. I'm not going to fault him for that on just roster construction. So out west, Nashville, Chicago, Colorado, and Anaheim. Those are my teams that I have on the naughty list out west. How about your teams?
So I do have Colorado, but it seems to me that they've kind of turned that corner, and the corner that they had to turn was they had to get rid of Georgiev. And I did mention it in our chat when the Panthers did play the San Jose Sharks that Blackwood was going to be a great goaltender on a contender, and then like 2 days later he's on Colorado Avalanche. He won his first game, so I mean I think he's going to be the guy for them going forward. But I'm still putting them on the naughty list because I think with the lineup that they have on that team, they should be able to outscore their problems. But maybe Georgiev was that much of a problem. I'm going to say Seattle, or not Seattle, St. Louis. Pardon me. How do you hire a coach and only let him coach maybe 20 games? I mean, honestly, I didn't have them anywhere near the playoff picture this year. I thought it was going to be like kind of a rebuilding and retooling year. But to show that you're going to fire your coach within 20 games, I don't know. It just shows that you didn't have faith in what you were trying to do. Nashville, for sure. We don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. Andrew Brunette said he's going to scratch everybody on that roster. You know what? Might as well. You know, you're probably going to lose that game anyways. And then I'm actually going to put, I don't know, Chicago I always had at the bottom still. But the other two teams, I will put Anaheim to an extent. They are where I think they are, but where they should be. But that's another team that I feel like they're improving and that they're starting to figure things out there. Now, whether Trevor Zegras is going to stay there or not, we don't know. He's been rumored for the last couple of years, but we'll see what happens with that. And then I'm going to have to go with Vancouver as well. Even though they're in a playoff spot, they don't look like the same team. I mean, don't tell Panthers fans that, obviously, with the recency bias, but they're not the same team they were. Pettersson looked like he's regressed a lot. After he signed his contract, he's not scoring a lot. He's getting scored on a lot, kind of like Mika Zibanejad. And then on top of that, I think missing their goaltender and Thatcher Demko has really kind of derailed them a little bit. So I expect a big second half from them, but don't be surprised if they stay a wild card team.
Yeah. Nashville is a very obvious one with, and they recently made a trade after extending Jeremy Lauzon in the offseason. Of course, they went a little younger with Justin Barron. So credit to Barry Trotz on making a move to at least get a little younger there. But just the amount of first-round picks they let walk out the door just recently, even though some of them were for last year, but still they it looks like Julian Breezewell was right when it came to letting go of Stamkos, and because where the Tampa Bay Lightning are, the Panthers are gonna see them in the next few days on Sunday and Monday. Chicago, the development isn't linear, but they haven't taken that next step. Connor Bedard hasn't taken that next step, and like you said earlier, he doesn't have that supporting cast like Celebrini has, and with the struggles of the face-off dot, I thought Luke Richardson was fired maybe earlier than he should have, but thankfully with Anders Sorensen, he has had some time with the guys up in down in Rockford, so he's growing along with them. And then Frank Nazar is now with in the mix with the Chicago Blackhawks, so maybe there's a little bit there. And also Lucas Reichel playing down in the lineup when maybe he should be playing in a middle six role. And Anaheim, I don't understand their direction right now. Thankfully, there's promise with Leo Carlsson. Bennett Seneca, who's had a highlight goal in the OHL just recently for him, that recent draft pick for him. And also, they have a goaltender right now in Lucas Dostal. He's the least of their issues over there. But also, when they made the trade for Trouba, they had the cap space to take all of his salary, but the fact that they couldn't trade Cam Fowler, which eventually he was traded to the St. Louis Blues, which we'll talk later of that, it was taking away some of the playing time of young defensemen like a Pavel Michikov, Owen Zellweger there. And again, they trade a guy just a few games before their 1,000th game. So that they did it with Corey Perry, and now they did it again with Cam Fowler. But wins or losses, the Anaheim Ducks are going to be really tough to play against, and they're going to wear you out. You're going to have need some ice packs after games when facing off against Jacob Trouba and Radko Gudas there. And I will make a prediction. I do believe John Gibson will end up on the Carolina Hurricanes sometime this year. I think that one is destined to happen.
I was going to bring that up, that now that Dostal has actually stepped up, and I think he is their number one goaltender for now and in the future. I'm surprised that Gibson hasn't been moved, but maybe, Anaheim is waiting for that, that team to just get really greedy and really desperate to get a goaltender. And Carolina might be that team. So we'll see if that does come to fruition. You have to look at other teams that might need goaltenders soon. So, I have to think about the Blackhawks too, because they don't really have anybody in the pipes that I would probably say is long-term solution. And then, I actually thought he would be a good fit in Colorado too. So the fact that Colorado was able to go out and get Blackwood at the prices they did actually works out for them pretty well.
Yeah, it's just a big cap hit that John Gibson brings at $6 million a year with still some terms. So that's the difficult part to navigate around that. And I'm sure with Colorado obviously winning Cup, the Bills coming due, they don't want to cap strap themselves into the future, even if there is some retained salary. So I can understand why of not making that move for Gibby over there in Anaheim for them. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss more about tonight's matchup between the Florida Panthers and the St. Louis Blues, as the Panthers will play their first home game in 13 days. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more where you place your bets. And if you are holding on a miracle for the Miami Dolphins to make the playoffs, you can win big if that unlikely possibility does end up happening. If they win 3 straight and one of the Denver Broncos or the Los Angeles Chargers lose their last 2. So, and you can do that all on FanDuel. So you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Segment number 3 here on this Friday, December 20th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. And Panthers Blues tonight from Amerant Bank Arena. Second year in a row that they're facing the Blues around a Stanley Cup final rematch. Last year, it was on the 21st, right before the Panthers faced off against the Vegas Golden Knights. So we've seen how the Panthers haven't gotten up for certain matchups for them, and how they've woken up for others. And for them, they've lost 2 straight against the St. Louis Blues at home. Thankfully for them, they ended up winning that second matchup last year where Matthew Tkachuk got a natural hat trick. The only goal that the Florida Panthers scored last year, Panthers were getting the zone. Etu knocks it off the boards, and then because Joe Hofer was not in his net, that puck goes in, and that's the only offense that the only goal generated for them when they generated so much offense off of 38 shots at end the year before. They were unable to contain Jordan Kyrou and his speed, and it ended up in a overtime winner for them. And last year during the Panthers Blues matchup, that was on the run where Sam Reinhart had 8 straight games with a special teams goal for them. But you spoke about the coaching change in St. Louis. 20 games for Drew Bannister, and then when Jim Montgomery became available, they got their guy. And I know hindsight is 2020, Nick, but when they signed Bannister to that extension after Toronto and Boston, that series was over. This is something that I think we should have seen if things went off the rails, but we also didn't think that Jim Montgomery was going to be fired so soon from Boston. There's a trend with coaches in Boston and going somewhere else in a matter of 8 days or less. We saw it with Claude Julien, Bruce Cassidy, now with Jim Montgomery there. But the build of the St. Louis Blues is interesting with a defense core that is locked up, a lot of them until their early to mid 30s. Still have Colton Parayko, who's on Team Canada with the Four Nations, but you think of guys like in the mix now, like Cam Fowler. They have to honor him for his 1000th game. Torrey Krug probably will never play hockey again, so that's cap space that they have there. But also, some of the no move clauses that they have will be modified no trade on their decor. So guys like Nick Leddy those conditions will change there. So I can see where they tried to make moves now, so to get them into the system right before they're ready to change over things next offseason for that decor for them. And we don't know who the starting goaltender will be tonight because Jordan Binnington was pulled after letting in 3 goals on 10 shots. So hard to put our finger on who will start. So I think I'm going to assume that Jim Montgomery will go back to Jordan Binnington, and knowing that there's a game that next night. So that's where I'm going to go with here. So how are you seeing this matchup for the Panthers against the Blues?
So you have a team that you have not played well against the last couple of seasons. They made a change in coaching to a coach that you basically know how to have your way with. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
You see the antics behind the bench whenever he's coaching against Florida, and it just seems like he just loses his mind a little bit. It would not surprise me if Jordan Binnington is in net tonight because, let's be honest, Montgomery doesn't know how to run goaltenders. He does during the regular season, but when it comes to playoffs or having to get a must-win game, he doesn't know how to handle that. It's just my scouting report on him. So I think this game might be personal to him because it's just the team that's constantly knocked him out of the playoffs. And I think with what St. Louis does, they have their fast wingers that could give the defense a problem, especially the Panthers defense this year, because they've had issues with containment or their gap control. And last game was probably their best defensive game all season. But you could still see that there was some issues where, they're being overly aggressive or they're pinching when they shouldn't, and it's causing odd-man rushes. So I would say if that happens tonight, depending on whoever's in goal, whether it's Spencer or Bob, it's not going to be their fault. So I'm probably going to say Florida could take this 4-2. But if the defense doesn't, close their gaps, I could see this being the other way around and Blues winning 4-2.
Yeah, and Pavel Buchnevich has been another player who's just been who has just kind of had his way against the Panthers recently. He's also a guy who could really get to that net front presence for them as well. So that's another thing for them that we see from the St. Louis Blues recently for them. So it's just for the Panthers here on just containing. And although they don't give up chances off the rush often, we've seen those get into the back of the net on the rare chances that they do. So thankfully for them, at times we've seen them contain the speed of the opposition. So gap control is really going to be something that we're gonna be looking at on a night like tonight. So Panthers have this home game against the St. Louis Blues, and then after that, a back-to-back against the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is another one of those teams that the Panthers will face off against of teams that they have faced in the last two postseasons, where the Panthers are 8-0 at this moment in time against those teams, and another opportunity coming up this weekend. We won't have a post-game show after tonight, but we will recap the first game of Bilt's Panthers after Sunday. So very excited for this one, as the Panthers will make their first visit to Tampa coming up on Sunday. And like we mentioned earlier, Julian Breezebaugh, he was right of letting Stamkos go. And and Jeff Merrick brought this up. When the Tampa Bay Lightning got rid of Ryan McDonagh, they regressed. When the Nashville Predators got rid of Ryan McDonagh, they regressed. So he's a big part of the identity of that team when they went to three straight Stanley Cup Finals, and really, even though he's on the older side for the Lightning, that he's definitely proven to be a big part of their defense guard. And also, there's a big injury on the Lightning. JJ Mosier, he's out 8 to 10 weeks. That was part of the trade for Mikhail Sergachev, so that's a missing piece for them. So that's another thing for them. So can't wait for the weekend as the Panthers look to build on their this stretch right before the new year, and which is another benchmark coming up for the entirety of the NHL, just to see where everyone is at. But Nick, I want to thank you so much once again for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Well, thank you for having me on again for another great Fairbanks Friday. Everybody can follow me on X at Prudential0. And like I said, during the road trip, if Florida was able to win three out of the 5, it was going to be a good road trip. If they win 2 out of the next 3 games, hopefully St. Louis and 1 against Tampa Bay, I think that's a good little Christmas present for us as Panther fans.
Yep. And one thing right before we sign off here, as morning skate is getting underway, although morning skates are optional, Sam Bennett and Jesper Boquist are not skating. But check back here on the YouTube page, as we will post on our community tab of their statuses for tonight, and as well on X at @LO_FLA Panthers and myself at MondoMan12. So check back there for the statuses of those players tonight as the Panthers take on the St. Louis Blues. But Nick, thank you so much once again, and I will see you next week.
See you next week, my friend.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.